I get more worried when the BBC puts Steven Pinker on, you know, or when Jordan Peterson gets kind of welcomed on mainstream platforms.
Yeah, which he does.
That certainly does, yeah.
I think that my phone did that. And Steven Pinker has never sort of not been mainstream, but he continues to plumb for this sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so you've written quite a lot in this book and elsewhere about debunking race science. There's a lot of interesting passages on the twin studies and how they're misrepresented. You mentioned the history of Ashkenazi Jews and IQ and fluctuating with social context. But I suppose, I mean, if you take someone like Sam Harris, who has expressed dismay as some of his sort of former colleagues joining the intellectual dark web, you know, he sort of used to travel in similar circles as some of them, and he's criticized some of those people like Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson for being too right-wing, but he still clings to the race science, or at least to the idea that we should be able to talk about it, right? He's still
He's gone a little bit further than that.
Yeah.
When he interviewed on his podcast Sam Harris, he said that your ideas have been proven. So that's you know that's a straightforward endorsement.
Well, and that's I mean that's sort of another thing where this, as you said, a lot of there's not actual qualified scientists who are advancing this, but they speak as if it's certain truth. And Sam Harris, I've heard him quote that article that was published that Sullivan helped publicize, saying that the bell curve was mainstream science.
Yeah.
You know, so this isn't really disputed in the science, but of course it's not disputed because it's not accepted at all.
No, it's not. It's a book probably where it's in every sense, its premises, its conclusions, and its methodology has been excoriated by experts in each of the fields it covers. Yeah.
So I guess the question about the goal of the book, because it is very illuminating, this debunking, but I wonder who you're kind of targeting. And maybe strategically, you know, we want to combat this sort of pseudoscience. So what's the best way to do? I mean, I don't think Sam Harris, or certainly not Charles Murray, is going to read the book, right? And be like, oh wait, I was wrong. Sam Harris probably not did it. So I mean, yeah, where do you see this kind of effort contributing to? Where does this debunking go? How does it help with the project?
That's a very good question. It's a difficult one to answer. I kind of think that you need as many shots across the bow as possible, and I don't think that one book by one person who's not a public celebrity is going to make a huge difference. But it's to counter the narrative that's getting put out, and just hopefully now and then it kind of, somebody will read it and will think, okay, I had it wrong. I mean, there are people who've gone down conspiratorial rabbit holes who have emerged. Not very many, but who have emerged on the other side. And I mean, there are a lot of people going down conspiratorial rabbit holes, and they kind of they might start off as anti-vax or something like that, and they end on kind of full-on Pepe the Frog, far-right racists. Yeah.
That's Russell Brand. That's what Russell Brand just did.
Russell Brand is a good. Yeah. And Naomi Wolf is another.
Yeah, Naomi Wolf.
Yeah.
No, I was certainly not saying that this one book would do it. Certainly, I didn't say this earlier, but I'm an academic who researches this area as well, and I write on it. So I definitely wouldn't claim that the number of people reading what you write is the most important thing. That put me in a bad position. But I think a lot of people will read this, and I think what I think is really useful about it, one of the things that's really useful about it, is that there are a lot of people who will hear someone like Sam Harris, who is very convincing. Even Jordan Peterson can be, like he can kind of tap into something and seem to offer an explanation for how the world works. Sam Harris is much more sober, so he could reach another audience. And they might think, oh, okay, this is mainstream science, right? And reading your book will put it in a frame that helps them understand why this is complete garbage, but also why it's attracting an audience, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I also want to ask about that because, I mean, part of what's happening, I was thinking about this when you were talking about the way they describe that Ashkenazi Jew example is really good because it seems sort of plausible. Oh, they were forced into money lending, right? So then they had to develop intelligence as a survival skill. And there's that kind of like crude social Darwinism. And that kind of connects to a lot of these sort of social media influencers who are, tapping into people who might be struggling, might have mental health issues, might just feel like things aren't going so well. And they're offering a vision of how to tap into like natural capacities, right? Like this is what makes a man, this is what makes a white person. These are our sort of natural tendencies. And part of the problem is we've lost sight of that because of the mainstream media, whatever, conspiracy theory, whatever reason for that. Those are lots of them. But they all come back to you need to tap into what's natural about you. I mean, do you see that happen? Do you think that's part of the appeal of race science, of this kind of like return to the natural, something that feels substantial?
Yes, I do. I mean, I do think and part of that I think is there's a kind of a popular genetic determinism.
Yeah.
That is out there, that people still have the idea, which a version of genetics, which goes back 150 years to Mendel and his pea experiments, where they think a single gene is responsible for everything, so that there's a gene for this and for that and for that, and it's very seldom that things work that way, and so then the idea that there must be a gene for intelligence, and then some people have got it and some don't, and maybe some population groups or race groups have got it and others don't. So I think that's the kind of dangerous trajectory of thought that it can be quite appealing.
Yeah, it's like a genetics as life hack, like this tap into this one trick. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, well, so the book is not just about the race science, so I wanted to bring in some other themes as well. One of the things I thought was really interesting is you write both about the role of a certain idea of South Africa for the far right, and also about being South African yourself. So I wondered, I mean, you can maybe take it in both directions or one or the other, but what do you make of this, the kind of symbolic space South Africa holds among the far right, and how do you kind of navigate that or understand that?
Yeah, I put it in the chapter partly because obviously I've come from there, so I'm interested in what's happening there, but also because it is used by the American alt-right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Tucker Carlson is probably the person more than anyone else who's promoted the idea of the great replacement, the idea that white people are being replaced by Hispanic people and black people, and that there is a conspiracy which involves usually George Soros or any other Jewish people they can find, or involves in its mainstream form the Democratic Party replacing them. And so that, I mean, that idea is kind of from people like Tucker Carlson has been kind of quite vigorously promoted. Sorry, just what was the question again?
Just this idea. Why is this preoccupation with South Africa? How has it become kind of
South Africa. Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So South Africa. Tucker Carlson has regularly returned to South Africa, and the issue there is that the claim that there's a conspiracy of what they call white genocide, to wipe out the white farmers, and it's a conspiracy that South Africa is just the example to use because that's what's happening all over the world about the white people. So South Africa is a convenient example. So that's, I mean, and then that's been promoted very vigorously, and people on the far right in South Africa have been going out and appearing on the Tucker Carlson show and other kind of quite mainstream forums, and have been promoting that idea. But I mean, the other side of it is that a number of these alt-right killers have referenced South Africa very strongly, and none more so than Anders Breivik, who you might remember was the Norwegian killer who went and gunned down, I think it was something like 70 people at a camp on an island, a socialist youth camp, and he was one of those who, in his long manifesto, He has a lot to say about South Africa and about the white farmers and about white genocide against them and so on. So there is a kind of resonance with the South African thing. Other killers, there was another one called Dylan Roof, who would wear Rhodesian from the old Rhodesia of Ian Smith and the old South African flags, and thought that apartheid South Africa was the solution, and a solution that is now gone, so one needs to take up the fight, that kind of thing. So it has been a place that the alt-right and the far-right have dipped into.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I mean, as those examples show, there is a kind of loosely organized transnational network of these sort of people. They're not just based in one place.